Do you love someone struggling with an addiction? Have you felt like it's your fault? Are you exhausted from sleepless nights, from being lied to and manipulated? And are you frustrated from arguing and fighting with this person when you're only trying to help? Well, it's time for you to step off the addiction roller coaster for good and learn a solution that works. Join addiction experts, hosts of the popular podcast, The Addiction Solution, and authors of The Freedom Model for Addictions, Mark Sharon and Michelle Dunbar, to learn a solution that will provide you and your loved one freedom from the addiction battle for good. It's called Families Moving Past Addiction Masterclass, and it's a 3-hour live online exclusive event where you'll hear information about addiction we guarantee you've never heard before, and that's great news. If you love someone struggling with an addiction, then this masterclass is for you. For more information or to enroll, click the link provided and register soon for the date that works for you, because each class will be limited to just 50 participants so we can best serve you. Welcome to the Addiction Solution Podcast. I'm Michelle Dunbar. Enjoy listening and watching as addiction experts Mark Sharon and I cover controversial as well as helpful topics on addiction, how to move past it, and other related subjects. As two of the co-founders of the Freedom Model, Mark and I will give you a completely new perspective on the topics that matter to you. We will take to task the Recovery Society's lies and misinformation and replace them with facts, research, and the methods to move on from addiction struggles without 12-step meetings, rehabs, and the shackles of endless recovery. Let's escape the treatment and recovery trap together and learn to be free. Welcome to the truth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Addiction Solution Podcast. I'm Michelle Dunbar.
And I'm Mark Sharon, and we have a guest today from the Doctor-Patient Forum. It's Beverly Schechtman. Is that
Schechtman?
Schechtman. I can never get it right.
It's not hard. It actually just sounded out.
Hi, Bev. Thank you so
Hi.
much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Just by way of introduction, the Doctor-Patient Forum is an advocacy group for chronic pain patients,
Yeah.
right?
That's part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Bev is going to give us a little bit because our audience, as you know, our audience knows, you're primarily on the side of things of struggling with addiction, right? But a lot of our audience also understands that if you have any history of a substance use disorder, or even now substance use disorder in your family, you may actually, and it's actually likely that you're going to be denied pain medication.
Right. Opiate pain medication.
Yeah. So, okay, Bev, explain to us how you help people.
So we started actually as a Facebook group, Don't Punish Pain Rally in 2017. And now in 2019, we opened a nonprofit, the Doctor Patient Forum. And our mission is kind of like changed a little bit over the years. And now it really is mostly about dealing with abandoned patients and people who are force tapered, because, you have a group of patients who are on opioids, whether there was some form of like liberal prescribing or not. You have, the number was 8 to 13 million in 2016 that they estimated, and they're just cutting them off. Like they're either arresting the doctors, or the doctor's retiring, or the doctor's afraid. And they're just like literally cutting these patients off, and they have nowhere to go. And so that's, we usually help those patients for the most part, but it also is, lately, it's been even a lot of people without chronic pain, just in acute pain, because now they're not giving opioids for post-op, like major surgeries and stuff. So It's mostly hearing from people in pain. We do deal with people with addiction who have chronic pain also, because, if they're on like Suboxone or methadone, and then they go into the hospital for an acute issue, a lot of times they not only don't treat the acute issue, but they also stop their medication, the same like they do for pain patients, which is just ludicrous. So that's mostly what we deal with for the most part. And then we also work with doctors who have been targeted, who were prescribing, who've been targeted by the Department of Justice. So we work on both ends.
So for our audience, just so people understand, this isn't the sort of thing that Well, I'm gonna have her tell her story because
Yeah.
I think it'll frame it best.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Let me just add this really fast before I tell my story. A lot of times people think that we're like teaching how to manage pain, like pain management centers and telling those doctors what they should or shouldn't do. And that's not at all what we do. There are other organizations who do that, like US Pain and different organizations. We aren't teaching people how to manage pain. We're basically standing up for the pain patient and trying to prevent harms to them that come from the way they're being treated. But I have Crohn's disease. I've had it for 20, probably 30 years now. And I get chronic kidney stones with it. And I was denied opioids in 2017 in the hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that's actually how I first found Claudia, who founded the organization. She had been on a Crohn's group where she was saying, hey, I'm noticing people aren't getting medication much anymore. And so she started talking about it. So I saw that she had done that. So I just called her sobbing from the hospital. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was probably the most traumatic experience I've ever had in healthcare. And I was, in and out of the hospital sometimes several times a month for like a decade because my Crohn's wasn't managed and I was having, kidney stones and kidney infections.
Oh my God.
But this specific incident, it was awful. Like it still traumatizes me. It's from 2017. So I tend to get kidney stones sometimes several times a month, and then I'll get kidney infections, and then I've become septic before. So I did have pain medication at home. It was actually several kidney stones that were passing in my ureter. They weren't big enough to require surgery, but big enough to obviously cause pain. And the way it always worked is my doctors would always say, if the pain medicine you have at home isn't working, if you can't keep it down, if you spike a fever, you got to go to the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
Because with Crohn's, they treat you with immunosuppressants. So if we get septic, it could be deadly really fast. So that's what happened. I had an infection and I had several kidney stones passing and I wasn't able to keep my medication down. I mean, I tried and I couldn't. So I went to the emergency room like I always did before. And the ER doctor, she was actually great. I mean, she treated pain and she was like, look, I'm going to admit you for pain and nausea control because I also vomit. When I have kidney stones, I can't keep anything down.
Yeah, they're painful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she's like, I'm going to admit you and do pain control. And then hopefully you'll pass it in a few days. And then you could, go on with your life. And which was typical. And I actually really did. I brought my pain medication with me to show the doctor because I knew things were already getting weird. And I wanted them to know I'm not asking you for a prescription to take home. I already have it. Here they are. Here's my oxycodone. And the ER doctor was great. And then the hospitalist, who they suck, but the hospitalist walked in. So they're awful. And upon entering the room, he said to me, he didn't even introduce himself, by the way. He just said, hey, I looked in your prescription history, which he was talking about the database, the PDMP. I looked at your prescription history and I noticed that you have gotten Ativan pretty regularly for the past so many months or whatever. And he's like, what's that for? And I was like, well, it has nothing to do with why I'm here. So I don't,
right.
What asking me this? And he was like, well, I need to know what it's for. And I said, it's for childhood, like from PTSD. And he was like, well, PTSD from what? And I was like, I was like,
yeah,
because I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, what is it from? And I said, childhood. And he said, was it childhood sexual abuse? And I said, it was. And he was like, I can't give you opioids now.
Oh my God.
He said, you're too high risk of addiction. I won't take part of that. He said, I'll give you what you get at home, but IV pain medication changes your brain chemistry, as does childhood abuse. Putting those two together, you're too high risk, and I'm not going to take part in that. And so I said to him, like, if you think that I'm, abusing these medications, just do a tox screen. Like, you'll see I have in what I'm supposed to. And he's like, oh, I already did. We already did that. And it's what it should be. And I was like, okay, then I don't understand the problem. Do you think that I'm faking? He was like, no, we see the scans. We have the blood in your urine. Like, we know what's happening, but I can't give it to you. It puts you at too high of a risk. And then he said, he punched me on the arm, actually, like does love tap and said, you'll thank me someday, which I haven't at all.
Oh my God.
So he did make a deal with me and he said, I'll admit you and I'll make a deal with you. If what we do doesn't work, I'll give you what you need to get out of pain. And I was like, okay, that sounds fair. So now I was shaken. Like, I was like, this doesn't, because now I feel like I'm being re-traumatized.
Yes.
I'm being blamed for something that was not my fault.
Yeah.
By a man with nobody in the
Yes.
room. So I get into the room, and it was probably the worst 24 hours in a hospital I've ever had. And I've been septic, I've had surgeries. This was the worst experience I've ever had. The nurse treated me like crap, like I was a criminal. When I was crying, she told me to stop crying. In the middle of the night, it was so bad. And so I called to talk to the doctor because I was like, well, they said they'd help. The doctor comes in and she says, you're here for Crohn's flare up. And I was like, no, I'm not. And see, that was my first clue that what the hell, they don't even know why I'm here.
Right.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm here for kidney stones. And she's like, well, then why aren't you getting opioids? And I was like, that's a good question. And she's like, of course I'll give you what you need. I was like, thank God. About 20 minutes later, the nurse comes in saying the doctor changed her mind. She's not giving it to you.
Oh my God.
It was really bad. And I cried during the night. I mean, I have a pretty high pain tolerance, but kidney stones hurts. They just,
oh my God.
Yeah,
We
I've
both
had
had them.
Yeah.
He and I both had them.
Yeah.
there's
Oh my
nothing
God.
you can do. There's no position that's comfortable. You can't do anything. And so I was sobbing and I asked for Ativan because that's a prescription I had at home. And she was like, that is not to treat pain. I am not giving it to you. So she refused my actual medication at home that I get. And so the next morning, a different hospitalist comes in and he was worse, much worse. He was this older, white-haired man, and he treated me like garbage. Like I've never been talked to like that in the healthcare system. And so he starts reprimanding me immediately, but this is a teaching hospital. So he has like all these people around him while he's reprimanding me. And he's like, no one gives opioids for Crohn's, for kidney stones anymore. They just give NSAIDs, which I'm like, that's bullshit because my husband just had them and he had all the opioids he needed. And I said, plus I have Crohn's, and they tell you all the time you're not supposed to take NSAIDs with it if you can help it because they can cause GI
That's
bleeds.
right. That's
and
right.
he's like, that's a lie. That is not true. That's not how it is. I'm like, how? So my whole life with Crohn's, they lied to me about it. Like, that's just not the way it is. And so he treated me like crap. And then finally I said, I need to go home. And he was like, finally, something we agree on. And so then he did his whole spiel. If things get worse, come back. And I was like, I would never come back here. I'd rather die at home from a heart attack than ever come back here. And then he threatened me. He's like, you're lucky I don't hold you for suicidal ideation.
Oh my God.
And then basically he discharged me. I called Claudia sobbing, and that's how that started. And then, last year Wired did an article and included this story, and I had to get my medical records for it for fact checking. Let me tell you something. The shit he put in my medical records, he put in there that I threatened to kill myself just to get IV medication. He said I told him I would do anything, even hurt myself on purpose to get IV drugs. Never said it, never would say it. He said I out and out refused any non-opioid medication. Didn't happen. He offered me NSAIDs, which I said I couldn't have. So there was like one sentence in there saying patient has confirmed kidney stones in the ureter, passing their calc, blah, 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 blah. And about 4 paragraphs about what a piece of shit I was and how I was drug seeking and suicidal. But my question is this. Why didn't he call for a psych consult if he thought? Why didn't he call for addiction consult? Why didn't he call my doctor to talk to them if they thought I was suicidal and was struggling with addiction? They didn't. He just wanted to be an ass, and he didn't want to give me medicine, and he succeeded. And I did, I called, I filed a complaint with patient advocacy, not knowing that they just worked for the hospital and they didn't do anything about it. And by the time I got the guts to call a doctor, a lawyer, the statute of limitations were up. It was past the 3 years. And so there was nothing I could do. But that's what got me into this whole thing. And
that's a big thing.
That's huge. So tell us, how did that experience then dovetail into you met Claudia?
Yeah.
And tell us now about what Claudia and you do now.
Yeah. So I called Claudia from the hospital sobbing, and we've talked a million times a day since. And she, we were seeing other people going through this. And so she's like, you know what? We need to have a protest. We need to get media, because she had passed this protest outside because someone left their dog outside in the cold, and they had like all this media. And she's like, if we can get that much media for a dog, surely people are going to care about. And I love dogs. I'm an animal lover, but she was just saying surely you could get it for people, but that's not what happened. But we did. We planned a protest in every state at the same time, all 50 states. We pulled the permit. We learned how to do it. We opened state pages in every state. we've had, I think, 6 or 7 rallies now, but media wasn't interested. They wouldn't tell this story. They don't want this story. Media wants a kid got addicted from a Vicodin, from a wisdom tooth surgery. He shot heroin the next day and died. That's all they care about. That's all they want to hear.
So why do you suppose that is? Tell the audience why why the narrative now exists.
So
that's the narrative.
Yeah. So, for a long time, I went into research because I was like, why the hell did they not give me opioids because I was abused as a kid and I'm in my 40s? Like, what? Something doesn't make sense. So then I did a ton of research and I found risk scores and all of this and years of trying to figure out what they're doing. And that was the same question I had, what you're asking. I was like, but what is their end game? Like, why are they doing this?
Right.
And so we came up with definitely the addiction, the very unregulated addiction treatment center industry is huge. And then a little bit later on, we realized the litigation narrative and multi-district litigation, which is bigger. That's by the time it's all said and done, they think they're going to bring in over 100 billion, and it's already, I think, 61 billion. So it's all about the litigation narrative, and in order to make that litigation narrative happen, there were some things they had to prove about drugs, and they based it on tobacco. They claimed to base it on tobacco. They kept calling opioids the next tobacco because that was that huge settlement, and it was the first big. But the difference is opioids have medicinal purpose. Tobacco doesn't. Tobacco is over the counter. Opioids aren't. So they had to counteract that. They had to make it sound, number one, that doctors give them out like candy, which is why you hear that every second of the day. And number two, they had to make it sound like they don't work for pain, which is why you hear that. And then in addition to that, they have to make everyone who took it a victim. So that's the hijack brain theory. That's the, I had no choice. My doctor gave me one pill, and after that, he should go to prison, and, I should get $5 million. And, that's what happened. That's why I think it is. And they're still pushing it for those reasons. I mean, listen, they started a new industry of opioid elimination. It really is.
It really is opiate prohibition. We're seeing opiate prohibition. But what's behind the lawsuit? Who's gaining from the lawsuits?
Our government, first of all, obviously the lawyers, the attorney general. My state alone is getting $1.4 billion, which he says every second he's on the television. So that money is one. And then, the lawyers also. And if you dig into it, you'll see the big lawyers like Motley Rice and all these people who are going to benefit from it. They all donated a ton of money to the senators who pushed this narrative. So they donated to the people to push this narrative and then benefited. So that's one big reason. And then another reason is just industry. I mean, and I like Suboxone for people with addiction. They should have access to it. It's fine. They should have access. I agree with that. I'm not saying I don't, but Indivior is the shadiest company I've ever seen, but no one wants to talk about it. So it's industry, treatment industry, unregulated in treatment rehab industry, litigation, and then it goes right back into the treatment industry. So this money is going to go to prevention. You'll hear them say it's going to prevention and treatment. So it's going to go to all these unregulated industries, and it's going to go to fund prohibition further, because to them prevention means prohibition. So it's bad.
So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and the true victims in all of this. Okay. So this was all set up based on the myths about addiction in general, right? The addiction treatment industry is this $45 billion industry. And so the real victims in all of this are people.
Yes.
Actual real people, individuals. And this is all set up so that all these, the tort lawyers and even the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, it looks as if the opiate pharmaceuticals are suffering, but they're really not. They're getting paid off in a backhanded way.
Well, yeah, and they're shifting to Suboxone, right? Lifelong Suboxone.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they demonize opiates, right? I mean, isn't that what's happening here? And so they have the bad guy. You need the bad guy.
Yeah. And
you need the distraction of the bad guy in order to build a new industry where with opiates, what they saw coming down the pike was fentanyl is killing all these people. And people thought the narrative was it's opiates, right?
Right.
People didn't make the distinction of what actually was happening. Now, if I'm wrong on any of this, Bev, you're the expert in this arena, so just cut me off.
Yeah.
And then, so now they have the bad guy. It's opiates. It's opiates. I mean, we heard it.
Yeah.
And the hijacked brain, is constant. It's such a lie.
It's all a lie. I mean,
it's all a lie. And the person with cancer is suffering.
Yeah, and they didn't. The thing is, it's not the people's fault that they didn't understand what was happening, because let me tell you, when they came out with this figure, the CDC shady as
anything. For sure.
Yeah.
They came out with this figure around the times of the CDC guidelines saying 34,000 people last year died from a prescription opioid overdose. Right? They said it. They and then about a year later, they were like, oh crap, we messed up. We counted illicit fentanyl as prescription. Oops.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
But all the laws were made already and everyone has already been programmed. So, and they've done this in the past, the CDC. This isn't the first time they've done this, like, whoops. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be the pattern.
Yeah, I think CDC is just, sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I think the CDC is really just a front, honestly, for mass tort litigation. I mean,
yes,
they just take from industry. They push the narrative that needs to be pushed. That's not to say they don't have any great people working there, but I think as a whole, it's pretty shady. But yeah, that's exactly what happened. And they miscounted it. Most states miscount it. And you'll notice they don't ever say this amount died from prescription opioids alone.
That's right.
That's right.
That. My state doesn't even count it.
Yeah, and when you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and when you look at just pills, you can't find it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, they
don't count
they
it.
sort of mix pills in with heroin, and now it's mixed with fentanyl and Ativan.
It's polysubstance typically, and alcohol is usually in the mix.
Right.
Yeah, but you know who wouldn't be dead? The people who took a pill thinking if it was prescription, if it actually had been a prescription pill, they'd be alive. Right. They wouldn't be dead. But they co-opted these parents' grief. They exploited. I have 2 teenage girls. I can't imagine losing one of them.
I know.
My heart breaks for these parents, but they don't realize they've been completely taken advantage of. And the way they push that narrative is by bringing the moms, exploiting the grief, going to the FDA with these angry moms. And they said to them, this is how you are going to prevent another parent from going through this. You have to make it so they don't allow prescription opioids. Even if their kid never took a prescription opioids, they still convinced them. And that's how they pushed it. That's how they pushed the narrative. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. About 10 years ago. Well, no, it was probably now maybe around 2005, 2006, because my kids are in their mid to late 20s now. And so they were preteen, middle school aged. There was an ad that all of a sudden showed up, and it was
everywhere. It was everywhere.
Everywhere. It was from the Partnership for Drug-Free America. And which you can't find this ad anymore. Like, I've looked for it on YouTube. It's totally disappeared, but it showed this guy on a street corner with a hoodie, and it said, and it was this during the after school specials. And I just happened to be home with one of my kids who was sick. And this ad was like, your kids don't have to go to the corner drug dealer anymore. They can just go to your cabinet.
Right. Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes. And then in New York, they have these huge billboards.
Yes.
A kid at the dentist chair saying, would you give your kid heroin?
Yes.
Give your kid a Vicodin. I mean, it's so bad. There's a Michigan Open in Michigan. These people pushing for no opioids or few opioids after surgery. They did a musical in high school where people dress up like Vicodin bottles and they sing about the harms of prescription opioids. It's such bullshit. But I mean, they did it.
They created it. It was created. It was the agenda started probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, it was almost, if I was a conspiracy person, which I'm typically not, I'd be like, holy cow, this was set up.
It was. And we go so far back. It was run by the attorneys general, by the National Governors Association, by all of these people. They ran this on purpose from then. I mean, I could picture them all sitting in a room saying, oh, this is so exciting. We're going to get so much money. We're going to get so much money. So how do we do it? What do we do? And they came up with it. And drug-free communities, by the way, that was one of the pillars. If you look at the ONDCP, the National Drug Strategy, and then the Prescription Abuse Drug Strategy 2010, 2011. Drug-free communities was one of the pillars of their strategy, as was the prescription drug database, data analytics, and law enforcement. They planned this before they created a fake crisis, and they planned it before, and they planned it. They needed a lot of deaths, and they created all these deaths.
It does make you wonder about the, fentanyl kind of showing up on the scene around 2006, 2007, that just kind of showed up, and all of a sudden, deaths skyrocketed, and it all kind of fit perfectly.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. I've always been good at seeing trends in society. It's just a gift that I have. I can honestly say that. Yeah. And I saw the end result, and I called the end result, which is this shift to Suboxone and gabapentin, right? This weird shift. Yeah. And now I see it in the addiction world, which is the end of the line. Okay. We're at the end of the line, the recipients of this sad thing that's happening. Now, I'm not opposed to somebody taking an opiate or Suboxone or methadone or anything, whatever helps. I don't give a crap.
It's between you and your doctor.
It is. And the reality is, if I was coming off of heroin, I would want some Suboxone to wean off, and it's a helpful drug. Would I want it for a lifetime? I wouldn't, because it's not necessary. We know from the data, it's not necessary to be on it for a lifetime. But here's what's interesting. The narrative quickly switched. Once Suboxone was the accepted drug for heroin, medicine, right? For your
addiction medicine,
which it has a place there. There's no doubt. As a stopgap measure, it's a great thing. But all of a sudden it became all about lifetime. And I predicted this.
And it became the panacea for pain.
Yeah, which is craziness, because it doesn't work for pain.
All of a sudden they're pushing that it works for depression too. They're pushing it completely. Yes. I do believe in Suboxone. If people want or need to stay on Suboxone for life, I'm all for it. Like, I don't care. Like you said, I think they should have access to whatever it is that works.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, and the thing that they're not saying is the vast majority of these people who are taking Suboxone for life, they would do a lot better with a clean, regulated batch, like supply of heroin.
Yes.
Full agonist that works for them. If they could get clean, regulated heroin, I would imagine some of them would rather that than Suboxone.
That's right.
Indivior funds it, though. Indivior funds all of these, like American Society of Addiction Medicine. Indivior completely funds that company.
100%. I would have no problem with the lifelong Suboxone movement if they told every single person it wasn't absolutely necessary.
That it wasn't required.
That it's required medicine. Yeah. So if somebody says, you know what, I want to take Suboxone for the rest of my life, it's no different to me than saying I want to take heroin the rest of my life.
Or I want to take oxys the rest of my life.
Or I want to drink for the rest of my life. There's no difference. Yeah. The difference is the agenda and the lie. That part bothers me, because then you take people who ordinarily would have a moment in their life with heroin, a moment in their life with Suboxone, and then go, you know what, I don't need this. I'm ready to move on with my life from this whole era. But that's not what's happening. It's everybody needs this for life.
Yeah, and that I agree with you. That's a problem, because people don't realize that the vast majority of people who would have been diagnosed with a substance use disorder at some point in their life, they stop on their own without anything, without any intervention. Right. And I am for it, for people to have access, but they needed our country to think that the second you take an opiate, you have an opioid, you're on the street shooting heroin, and then you're murdering your family. Look at this Murdoch trial. Look what they turned out.
I know.
Yeah.
No, opioids do not make you murder your family. That's if you get a Vicodin for oral surgery, you're not going to murder your family in a couple days. It's just not. It's not how it works. If you're going to murder them, that it's not because of the opioid. But I agree with you. I definitely do. And now, like you said, the push is for Suboxone for pain as the only thing for pain. And the VA came out with these recent guidelines, updated guidelines over the summer. They just were pushed again a few weeks ago, where they said nobody with chronic pain in the VA should ever be on a full agonist opioid, only buprenorphine. That's the only thing they should ever be on.
And the crazy part is that the withdrawal is twice as bad.
Yeah.
You know, so their argument for opiates, half the argument is this withdrawal issue driving use.
Right.
And here you have a drug that is harder to get off of, is being pushed for lifetime, and that you need it, or else you're going to end up this, you know, drug taking zombie that kills their family, you know, and the whole thing is packaged lies.
Yes.
And it's super sad. It's super sad.
I agree with you. It's a terrible thing. I just watched because I tortured myself watching these presentations and webinars from these anti-opioid idiots. And there's one in Michigan, and there were like 4 videos a few weeks ago on how to switch all pain patients to Suboxone, to buprenorphine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so this guy literally, he's a doctor teaching other doctors, and he was like, look, opioid-induced hyperalgesia, I don't know that if it's a thing. He's like, we have no evidence behind it at all. But patients don't know that. He was like, so just tell your patient that that's what they have. He's like, this is how I do it. I draw a picture and I make up this whole story about how it shuts things off in your frontal cortex and the downward, and he like makes up this whole thing. And he's like, most patients will be like, sure, that there must be some truth. My doctor wouldn't make it up. And he's like, and the ones who don't, the ones who push back, they have serious psychological issues, and you need to treat them for addiction. That's what he said. And this man, he said, anytime a patient says I need more medication or my pain is worse, that's the time to remove them or put them on Suboxone. And he's taking people from 2 Vicodin a day and pushing them on Suboxone, which makes absolutely no sense.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But it is the movement.
I want to make a point for our audience here. And one of the things when we talk to people about what addiction is and what it isn't, a lot of times we're, the argument for addiction, the brain disease and the hijacked brain, is because it's supposed to reduce stigma, right? That's the goal. When you really look at all the data and the research, most scientists and doctors will admit, okay, it's not a disease like we know disease.
Right. And the brain isn't hijacked.
And the brain isn't really hijacked. So that most of them, if they really are critical thinking, you'd all know that. So, but here's what we're seeing is exactly what you and I predicted 30 years ago, which is no, it didn't reduce stigma at all. Not only did it increase it, because the stigma is now surrounding any substance use at all.
Correct.
So now, the whole thing, if you have to take an opiate, it's stigmatized. People should not be scared to go to the emergency room and say, I broke my arm. I'd like something for the pain.
Yeah, you can't do that, whether or not. And when people with addiction issues go and they get their pain not treated, they think it's because they have SUD. It's not. Nobody's getting their pain treated now. And I agree with you. They didn't remove stigma. Also, that money, it's not going to go to helping those who need it. That money is going to go to our government and fund an industry that's pushing prohibition. That's going to make it worse. And they just expanded stigma. They did not remove stigma at all. And there's always this view of there's like pain patients and people with addiction issues, and they're kind of at odds. And I think the government did that on purpose. They did that against each other, because one thing you'll hear, and I do try to teach pain patients, like, stop. Don't blame them for what the government's doing. But I can see why, because I used to do it too. But one thing that they say, when patients are like, I don't have opioid use disorder, you'll see people in the addiction industry saying, why? You think you're better? Stop saying that. Stop stigmatizing us. But the fact of the matter is that they don't understand. Our government forces the doctor. Every time they prescribe an opioid, they have to prove that patient doesn't have OUD, because it's illegal.
Oh my God.
It's illegal. So the reason we have to say it is because the doctors have to prove it. And the reason the doctors have to prove it is because of the Controlled Substance Act. And, they need to just get rid of all of that. They need to get rid of all of it.
So the question is, for me, because I see things from the big perspective all the time, right? And I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I guess I've developed
I am now.
yeah, I've kind of developed into, wow, there really is shit going on.
Yeah.
So the question is, the pharmaceutical companies aren't stupid. The CEO of these companies is looking at it, and he's looking at his stock sheet, and he says, well, we're going to get taken with this opiate lawsuit deal for $50 billion, right? And the lawyers are getting that money in the government, and they're going to siphon out of our account, our insurance company's account, all this money, and it's going to cost us $75 billion. How can we recoup that?
Right.
So the answer is come up with a drug that is the answer to the thing you're getting sued about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So because it's all about funds. Pharmaceutical companies don't give a shit about your care. If they did, half the drugs, they're harmful to the body. I mean, you look at the side effects that they have to list on some of these things. It's outrageous.
They don't care.
They don't care. And that's become so really obvious in the last few years.
Yeah.
Right? They do not give a shit. So from my perspective, it's very simple. And that is, we shift everything with this narrative to Suboxone, to methadone, and they'll have all Vivitrol, all of it is going to be, and they're like, oh, harm reduction is the answer. So they co-opt that term, and then they co-opt this term, and then they co-opt that. And it's all about generating cash and a lifelong customer to make up for the losses. That's what this really, from my perspective, comes down to.
And it's about control.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, in the government side of things, it's about control.
Yeah, and funding, because with control comes the funding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I do believe in harm reduction. I believe in it completely. We've tried to.
Yeah, better is better.
Yeah, for sure.
Stop telling people to stop doing drugs. Like, let them take what they're going to take, and let's keep them alive. And if our government had done nothing, these people, most of them wouldn't be dead. Most of them would still be alive, because they wouldn't have died from illicit fentanyl, because it wouldn't have been a need for it in the black market.
That's exactly it.
Exactly. Prohibition. We've said this. When you look at the data over even just the last 50 years, the more the addiction disease narrative has become mainstream, the more addiction treatment that's available, the more we've demonized drugs, the more the drug laws are pushing people into the black market, the higher the death rates. I mean, it's an exact correlation.
It's so obvious.
But they just double down, Mark. They just double down. They don't pull back. No. They won't stop. I mean, I don't know how many more people they want to kill. Did you see that bill that they either introduced it or they're talking about introducing it? I think it's in California, that they want to make it illegal to completely ban tobacco products for anyone born after 2007 for the rest of their lives.
Oh my God, I didn't see that.
Like, what the hell are you are they out of their minds? Like, that has ever worked? What do they want to have another black market where there's more dangerous products? I mean, even vaping, like that whole vaping thing.
I know.
Died are the ones, most of them are the ones who got something that wasn't a real product, but they used that, they co-opted that. My state got, I think, 50 million from suing Juul already. So,
Well, when the mayor of New York City bans 32-ounce things of soda, we've gone to a place that's absolutely bizarre.
Well, it's actually really sad, because all of this is killing people. And keeping people in pain, and the fat cats make the money. And look at, I'm a capitalist. I'm a libertarian. I believe everybody should be entitled, but we need to be informed.
Yes.
And that's our job. That's what we're doing.
Yeah,
we're
that is what we're
people
doing.
that when you go to your doctor and you're in severe pain, or you have cancer and you're dying, and you want to go in comfort, you should be allowed to do that. And we want everybody to know, if you're a heavy drinker, a heavy substance user, we don't judge any of it, because it's a preference people build. This isn't
We want to send you a free copy of our revolutionary book, The Freedom Model for Addictions. To help us bring this incredible gift to you, we ask that you pay a small fee for shipping. Learn how tens of thousands of people have permanently solved their addictions without steps or meetings, and make 2023 your best year yet. Give yourself or someone you love the gift of total freedom from addiction. Click on the link to get your free copy sent to you today. Are you struggling with a drug or alcohol problem, but you don't want to go to rehab or group meetings? Well, That's why we created the non-12-step Freedom Model Coaching Program in 2011. Through video conferencing on Zoom or Skype, you can work privately with a certified Freedom Model coach from your home or office on your schedule. And here's the best part. With the Freedom Model, you'll never be labeled an addict or an alcoholic, and we won't tell you to go to 12-step meetings or hamper your life with endless recovery rituals. Instead, you can learn exactly why addiction isn't a disease and how you can solve the problem for good and move on with your life. Do you want to be completely free from your addiction? Do you want to never have to attend meetings, rehabs, or addiction counseling ever again? And do you want to solve your problem from the comfort of home? Then call us at 888-424-2626 to talk with a Freedom Model coach today and experience the Freedom Model difference.